Christopher Nolan is back in the news and he keeps getting reheated like forgotten leftovers. This man is done. He's burnt to a crisp. So now we're at the real question here. Is the Odyssey cultural appropriation of Greek culture? Now, personally, I think this conversation is way more interesting than people are having because under all the Twitter yelling and YouTube thumbnails with glowing eyes, there's actually a real conversation here about culture, storytelling, race, and who gets to tell what stories anymore. So let's talk about it. So, is the culture war coming for Greek mythology? So, to start off, I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting a little worried about this film. Not a lot, and not because people are flaming it online, that's part is a given. Every major movie gets dragged now. Somebody should announce the next Shrek movie and see how long it takes to become a political debate by lunchtime. Actually, I think they already did that. But what worries me more is finding out Nolan's version is apparently pulling from Emily Wilson's translation of the Odyssey, and if you don't know, her version was designed to feel more modern and accessible. Now, that doesn't automatically mean woke disaster right out the gate, but I do think there's a valid concern here. When studios start aggressively modernizing old stories, sometimes they stop feeling timeless and start feeling a little contemporary. And it bothers me a bit that maybe Nolan's version isn't a pure Nolan version as it should be. Now, that doesn't mean you can't or shouldn't modernize a film, and if I was going to trust anybody to do that, it would be Nolan. But it could still be dangerous given where cultural understanding and acceptance is kind of right now, which is kind of in a weird place. But at the same time, I understand why people are watching this very carefully, especially now that we live in an era where race swapping, culture swapping, identity politics, whatever, in film have become their own cinematic universe, really. But I digressed enough. Let's get back to the real question. Is the Odyssey cultural appropriation of Greek culture? Should cultures tell their own stories from now on? Black people, especially in entertainment, have spent years saying, stop taking our stories and filtering them through somebody else's lens. I talk about that all the time even. That's part of why blackface was so disgusting historically. It wasn't just people painting themselves darker, it was a caricature. It took black identity, mannerisms, culture, speech, twisted it into entertainment, and then didn't even allow actual black people to tell their own stories to counteract that other narrative. That's the important part people forget. The issue wasn't only imitation, it was control. Now, obviously, Nolan making the Odyssey isn't something like Greek face, for lack of a better word, but the core questions underneath, oddly enough, I think are still very similar. Because Nolan isn't Greek. And even though he is still white, he's British and American, that perspective on Greek mythology might differ from how Greek people see themselves or would talk about it themselves, would approach it culturally. His version may romanticize different things, modernize different things, change different values, push different themes. And technically, I think that is his right as an artist. But I do wonder if we're entering an era, or we already are in that era, where people increasingly want cultures to handle their own stories for at least the current time, even if it's an ancient story. And to be honest, probably modern Greeks are nothing like the ancient Greeks. Now, it wouldn't even be forever, but maybe while society is this heated, we'll say, because right now every casting decision feels like a political campaign ad, especially coming out of America, out of Hollywood predominantly. Now, here's where I personally stop short a little bit. I don't think creativity survives if everybody is forced into a racial creative box. Because where does that end? Does that mean nobody outside of Japan can touch anime-inspired stories or Japanese stories at all? Does that mean only Italians can make mafia movies? Does that mean Neil Patrick Harris can never play a straight character again because actors should only portray themselves? Like, at some point, you stop protecting art and you start strangling it. But there probably does have to be a limit, right? Like blackface. But acting is pretending. Storytelling is perspective shifting. That's literally the whole point. Now, should creators be respectful? Absolutely. Should they understand the culture they're adapting? Of course. They should do their research, spend some time abroad even. Should they avoid turning cultures into aesthetic costumes? Definitely. But I also don't know if the answer is everybody stay inside your cultural and racial lane, especially not forever, because then cinema becomes weirdly segregated and, ironically, I think less creative. At the same time, though, I do think audiences are becoming more sensitive to authenticity and agendas and whether their agendas are there or not. still, you know, everybody knew when you made these casting choices what was going to happen. Nobody made this and can claim surprise Pikachu face. Everybody knows. But I get it. People want to feel, to see themselves in different roles, to see themselves from different perspectives, that they could be the hero or the villain or a very complex character with the makings to go either way, especially communities that already feel underrepresented. So I understand both sides. At the end of the day, we're all a bunch of humans watching and emulating other humans that we're seeing and want to be like and things like that. And honestly, I think that's why the Odyssey has created such a discourse in the first place, because it's not really about ancient Greece, not really. It's about modern anxiety around ownership, identity, race, and storytelling and politics, and Greek mythology has just become the newest battlefield. Because there's been cartoons, there's been other shows, other movies where they will swap and change things all of the time, and nobody really said anything or cared at that time. At the end of the day, I still think Nolan's probably going to make a visually insane movie. I am still going to watch it. The man could direct somebody buying groceries and somehow make it feel like the fate of humanity is at stake. This is the guy who made The Dark Knight, Oppenheimer, Interstellar, Memento, and it goes on. He somehow made people emotional over a spinning top. I say let the man do his thing. I am not in full panic mode because he's got this, and I'm willing to sit back, wait, and enjoy. But the conversation around this film, it does actually interest me, and it has kind of made me think about things a little bit differently, at least right now. Because even though I stressed it many videos ago that this is not history, this isn't a documentary, this is not a reenactment of real events, I wonder if it is worth having a conversation of how much are we willing to change another culture's story before we've crossed the line. Where is that line? Because basically, as I was saying before, Black people want Black creators to be able to tell their own stories. I think there's been a lack of opportunity for that I personally also want more of that. But it was never necessarily that white people couldn't tell stories too involving or about or starring Black people. It was just give Black people the opportunity to also tell those stories. But what if it gets to the point where which the modern takes on these older stories now have been changed so much that the old stuff eventually does fade away? And though these are not documentaries, these are not historical textbooks, I wonder if it's worth having that conversation that even a little bit, just on a wider lens. If people won't read the original text of Iliad, of the Odyssey, is it worth preserving from a fictional perspective, at least the old stuff right now? Do we need to have a balance? If we're going to create a new modern version of the movie, should we then create a old version alongside it? How would you handle that? How should we handle that? Because we're reaching a moment culturally where I think people are asking, should creatives only create within their own race, religion, ethnicity, and history? Mind you, no one I think is saying this out loud, but it feels like we're all sort of hinting around this. All of us as a collective, the frustrations that I'm seeing online, it's like, are you hinting around that fact where you're saying that's how it should be, at least right now, so as not to offend anybody, which is ridiculous. And I think both sides, left, right, whatever you want to pick, both sides get offended on anything that comes out these days. But then, does art completely fall apart the second we start putting these walls up? Because personally, I think it probably would. But honestly, I don't know. I don't even know if there's an easy answer for this. So you tell me what you think. Should cultures mostly tell their own stories now, even if just for a time being, or should artists still have complete freedom to reinterpret anything they want? And where's the line between the adaptation and appropriation? And I think that's the real question, actually. Where is that line? Because if we have it and we kind of know it, then we can play around it, but then people are going to play very close to it. Is it a wibbly wobbly line? So it sort of draws itself all over the place and we just are sort of adapting through time and space. Let me know in the comments down below. And that's it for the video. If you enjoyed, you'll love the next one coming up. But until then, like, comment, and share this out.